Hello, my name is Miss Jones. I teach elementary school math, and welcome to my channel, Miss Math Jones. Today we're going to be working on our third grade Eureka Module 3, Lesson 19 homework. The homework objective is to use place value and the associative property to multiply multiples of 10. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so as I said before, we're working with the associative property. Now, we've completed homework before with the associative property, meaning that in a multiplication problem, one of the larger numbers is going to get broken apart to make the numbers easier to work with. And we're going to be grouping them to help us do that. So let's look at number one. Number one has an A and a B. All right, so let's go ahead and start with 1A in the ones area. So go ahead and create a place value chart so that you can see where these numbers are coming from and how to work with them. All right, so we're going to look at the ones place value area, and we have ones discs. How many ones discs do you see? Go ahead and count them. You should have gotten 10. There are 10 ones discs. All right, now we can't leave a whole 10 in the ones place, but we can bundle that 10 and put 110 in the tens place, and that leaves us with 0 ones. So when we see the number 10 in the place value chart, it should have a 1 in the tens place and a 0 in the ones place. Now, let's move on to the tens part of the place value chart. Go ahead and create a place value chart on the 10 side also. So you should have a place value chart on the one side that looks like mine, and you should have a place value chart on the tens side that looks like mine as well. Okay, now we have tens discs on the 10 side. Now, each one of these discs is worth 10, and we have 10 of these. Now, we can't leave that whole 10 in the tens place, but we can bundle it because 10 tens is equal to 100. So we put a 1 in the hundreds place, and we no longer have any tens, so we're going to put a 0 in the tens place and a 0 in the ones place. So all this top part is doing is showing you how to properly place your numbers in a place value chart. Now let's move on to the actual problem. A says 2 times 5 times 10. Now, they have the 2 times 5 in the parentheses. So as we know, anything inside of the parentheses, you work that part of the problem first. And what's 2 times 5? That's right, it's 10. So if you said 10, you're correct, which means that problem is actually 10 times 10. They also expressed it as 10 ones times 10, which is the same thing as saying 10 times 10. Okay, now, if you don't know off the top of your head the answer or the solution for 10 times 10, that's okay. I'll show you a little trick. You take the first number, which is 10, and you multiply it times the first digit in the multiple of 10, which so happens to be, for this problem, 10. So we're going to multiply 10 times 1. 10 times 1 is, you guessed it, 10. And what do we do with that 0 that's left? Well, we just bring it down and write it in the ones place. So our answer to 10 times 10 is 100. Now let's go ahead and look at 1B. We're going to start by analyzing or looking at the information in this place value chart over here above letter B. So first, let's look at the ones place. Go ahead and write a place value chart over there by the ones place. Okay, we have some discs in the ones place. How many discs do we have in the ones place? That's right, 5. So go ahead and write a 5 under the O for ones in your place value chart. Now we're done with the one side. Let's move over to the tens place. Go ahead and create another place value chart over here in the tens place. Now, if we look at the tens place, we have more discs in the tens place than we did in the ones place. Count those discs in the tens place. How many place value discs do you see in the tens place? That's right, 10. Very good. Now, we cannot leave a whole 10 in the tens place, but what we can do is we can bundle it, and we know that 10 tens is 100. So I'm going to bundle that 10 and turn that whole 10 into 100. Now I don't have anything in the tens place, so I'm going to put a 0 there. And I don't have anything in the ones place, so I'm going to put a 0 there also. All right, so 10 tens written in a place value chart is 100. There should be a 1 in the hundreds place, a 0 in the tens place, and a 0 in the ones place. All right, now let's look at the actual problem here, where they broke everything that's in the place value chart apart. So the actual problem next to the letter B is 2 times 5 times 10. Now notice the parentheses is around the 5 times 10, which means that's the part of the problem that we work first. And if we go down to the next line, they have 2 times 5 tens. Well, we should know that 5 tens is the same thing as what number? 50. That's right. So we're going to rewrite the problem next to that. So 2 times 5 tens equals 2 times 50. So on your paper, you should be writing 2 times 50 because we always want to write the problem out so that it looks like a normal equation to us. Makes it easier to solve. Now we're going to use that same trick that we used in the other problem. All right, so 2 is a one-digit number. So I'm definitely going to multiply 2 times the first digit in my multiple of 10, and that's a 5. So 2 times 5. Now, we just discussed that 2 times 5 is what? 10. That's right. All right. And for that 0 that's left there, we just bring it down and put it in the ones place. So that means that 2 times 50 is actually 100. Now, if you were not able to follow along while we were going through the problem, that's okay. Go ahead and pause the video now so that you can make sure you have all of your notes written down and that you understand what we just did. Now let's look at letter C. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to create a place value chart on the one side first. All right. How many ones discs do we have here? I'll give you a moment to count it. That's right. If you said 20, that's absolutely correct. Now, we cannot leave a whole 20 in the ones place, but we can bundle it How many tens do we have in the number 20? Well, if you said 2, you're right. So we can put a 2 in the tens place, and we can write a 0 in the ones place because all of our ones now are in the tens place because we bundled it. So when we write 20 in a place value chart, the 2 goes in the tens place, the 0 goes in the ones place. Now let's move over to the tens place, and we're going to write another place value chart over here. And the purpose of this is just to show you the relationship of the numbers, to show you how you should be writing numbers in place value charts, and to show you how you can break apart numbers and bundle them and put them back together again. Numbers are always going to be easy to work with when you understand that they're made up of other numbers. So this is just to help you in your understanding of numbers. All right, so you should have your place value chart written on your 10 side. And I want you to go ahead and count the discs in the place value chart on the 10 side. If you said 20, you're correct. We do have 20 tens discs. Now we cannot leave that 20 in the tens place, but I do know that 10 tens is 100. So that means that 20 tens is 200. So since I bundled my tens and put them in the hundreds place, I'm going to write a 0 in my tens place because I no longer have any tens, and a 0 in my ones place because I don't have any ones. So that means that 20 tens are the same as 200. All right, now let's look at this problem right next to letter C. All they did was broke apart a way to solve for 200. So the equation next to letter C says 4 times 5 times 10. All right, well, let's solve what's in the parentheses first. Well, what's 4 times 5? Now remember, 4 times 5 is the same thing as saying 4 rows of 5. They gave you 4 rows of 5 in the ones place. And how many ones was that? That's right, it was 20 ones. So they're saying 20 ones times 10. Well, 20 ones times 10 is the same thing as saying 20 times 10. Go ahead and write that equation next to the equation right there on your paper, just like I did. All right, now let's use our special trick to solve 20 times 10. So I'm going to take the whole number 20, and I'm going to multiply it times the first digit in my multiple of 10, which means I'm going to multiply 20 times 1. Well, we know that anything times 1 is that number. So that means that 20 times 1 is 20. Very good. And what do we do with that 0? Bring it on down. So that means that 20 times 10 is 200. Okay, let's move over to letter D. We're going to do the same thing so that we can see the relationship with the numbers. So let's go ahead and create a place value chart in our ones place. And let's count our ones discs. If you said we have 5 ones discs, You are absolutely correct. So in your place value chart that you create, on the one side of this place value chart that's on your paper, go ahead and write a 5 under your ones place. All right, let's move over to the tens side of your place value chart. And let's create our own little mini place value chart so that we can explore and talk about the relationship of these tens discs. Okay, go ahead and count the tens discs. You should have gotten 20. There are 20 tens discs. Well, we cannot leave a 20 in the tens place. We can bundle it though. Again, I know that 10 tens is 100. Well, if 10 tens is equal to 100, then 20 tens is equal to 200. So I can go ahead and write a 2 in my hundreds place. Since I bundled all of my tens, I don't have any more tens, so I'm going to write a 0 in my tens place. And on this side, I don't have any ones, so I'm going to write a 0 in my ones place. So that means that 20 tens is the same as 200. It's another way to say 200. All right, now let's actually look at letter D, the equation that's next to letter D that breaks apart a way to solve for 200. Okay, the equation reads as 4 times 5 times 10. Now again, look at those parentheses. We're going to work the problem inside of the parentheses first. 5 times 10. What is 5 times 10? Well, 5 times 10 is 50. Okay, well, how many tens are in 50? That's right, 5 tens. There are 5 tens in 50. Very good. So they rewrote the problem as 4 times 5 tens. And you already said that 5 tens was the same thing as 50. So let's go ahead and rewrite the equation next to the one on our papers, showing an equation that we can work with to solve. 4 times 50. So that's the equation that we're solving. 4 times 50. Well, let's go ahead and use our method of underlining the first digit of the number that's in the first part of the equation, which is a 4. And we're going to multiply that 4 times the first digit in the multiple of 10, 5. So we're going to multiply 4 times 5. Well, what is 4 times 5? Same thing as 4 rows of 5. And we have 4 rows of 5 in our place value charts that were already on our papers. Well, 4 rows of 5 is the same thing as saying 20, right? So 4 times 5 is 20. And what do we do with that 0? Bring it on down to the ones place. So that means that 4 times 50 is 200. Now, if you were able to follow along and write in the information or follow along to check your math, great. If you need a few minutes to write everything down and check your math, go ahead and pause your video now. Let's look at number 2. Number 2 says solve. Place parentheses in C, letter C, bubble C, and D, bubble D, as needed to find the related fact. Okay, so here we're starting at letter A, or the bubble with the letter A in it. All right, now the equation that we're trying to solve is 3 times 20. So you'll notice that next to it, they broke apart the 20 into 2 times 10, right? Now, with the associative property, sometimes you group your numbers differently to make them easier to work with. So here, instead of putting the parentheses back around the 2 times 10, which they wanted to break apart, they placed parentheses around the 3 times 2. Well, 3 times 2 is an easy problem to solve. 3 times 2 is 6. So now we have 6 times 10. Well, that looks a little less scary than 3 times 20, right? Because we know what 6 times 10 is. 6 times 10 is 60. Now, 6 times 10 is equal to the same thing as 3 times 20. The only difference is it's packaged differently. That's it. It's equal to the same number. So, using the associative property, it made the numbers friendlier. All right, let's move on to bubble B, letter B. So the equation that we're trying to solve is 3 times 30. Well, let's break apart that 30. Now, the 30 was broken into 3 times 10. So instead of 3 times 30, we ended up with 3 times 3 times 10. Now, we want to move those parentheses from around the 3 times 10 and over to 3 times 3, because that makes it a little easier to work with. Well, what's 3 times 3? If you said 9, you are correct. 3 times 3 is 9. So now, instead of 3 times 30, we have 9 times 10. And what's 9 times 10? If you said 90, you are absolutely correct. Very good. Now, just as the instructions stated, for the information in bubble C, we're going to have to place our parentheses around the correct numbers to solve. And this is going to help us use the associative property. Okay, let's take a look at C. Now, the problem we're trying to solve in C is 3 times 40. And they broke apart the 40 for us. So now, instead of 3 times 40, we have 3 times 4 times 10. See that? Now, the parentheses is around the 4 times 10, but we want to move it over, right, to make it friendlier to work with. So we're going to place the parentheses around 3 times 4. Now, what's 3 times 4? If you said 12, you are absolutely correct. 3 times 4 is 12. Now we have to multiply 12 times 10. Now, it might look scary. It should not be, but it might look scary. And that's okay, because we can figure that out. Now, if you already know what 12 times 10 is, and you were like, Ms. Jones, I already know that. It's 120. Great. However, if you need to write it out to the side and use our little trick in order to solve it, that's fine too. So let's write it out to the side. We have 12 times 10, right? So we're going to take the first number, 12, and multiply it times the first digit of the multiple of 10, which is 1. What's 12 times 1? Well, 12 times 1 is 12. And what do we do with that 0 that's left there all along? Well, we ask them to join the party in the ones place. So 12 times 10 is 120. All right, let's move on to letter D. Now, the problem that we are trying to solve here is 3 times 50. So they broke apart the 50 for us into 5 times 10. So instead of 3 times 50, now we have a problem or an equation that shows 3 times 5 times 10. Now what we're going to do is place parentheses around that 5 times 10 because that will give us our original problem all over again. So now we know where we don't want the parentheses. And let's talk about where we do want the parentheses to make it friendlier to work with. All right, well, if we move the parentheses over to 3 times 5, then that equation is a little bit more friendlier to work with. What's 3 times 5? It's easy. If you count by fives, hold up 3 fingers. 5, 10, 15, right? 3 times 5 is 15. So now we have 15 times 10. Now, some of you may be screaming out, hey, Ms. Jones, I already know. 15 times 10 is 150. And if you know that already, great. But if you don't, that's okay. Let's work it out. 15 times 10. So we're going to underline the whole first number of 15, and we're going to multiply it times the first digit of our multiple of 10. So now we have 15 times 1. Remember, anything times 1 is that number. So what's 15 times 1? If you said 15, you are absolutely correct. 15 times 1 is 15. And what do we do with that lonely 0? We invite them to the party in the ones place. So that means that 15 times 10 is 150. Now, if you were able to write and follow along while we were going through the problems, great. And if you're still writing and you need a moment to finish writing your notes or even review what we did, go ahead and do that now. If you need to rewind it, go back, take a look at it, do that. If you need to pause the video to write down the information, do that now. Okay, let's look at number 3, which is our last question of our homework. Number 3 says, Danny solves 5 times 20 by thinking about 10 times 10. Explain his strategy. Here I feel that the best way to explain the strategy is by actually working through the problem. So let's go ahead and work through the problem. So Danny solves 5 times 20. I believe we should solve 5 times 20 also. So let's use our little trick. We're going to multiply the first number in the equation, 5, times the first digit in the multiple of 10, 2. Well, what's 5 times 2? Well, if you don't know that from memory, hold up 2 fingers, count by fives. 5, 10. That means 5 times 2 is 10. Well, we have that little lonely 0 sitting there. Let's invite him to the party in the ones place. So that means that 5 times 20 is 100. So Danny solved 5 times 20. We also solved 5 times 20. We're as smart as Danny. Now, Danny solved it by thinking about 10 times 10. Well, why would he do that? Let's figure it out by solving 10 times 10, shall we? All right, we have 10 times 10. Let's use the same trick we've been using the entirety of our homework and underline the first number in the equation. Whole number, 10. And we're going to multiply that 10 times the first digit of the multiple of 10, which is 1. 10 times 1. That's 10 one time. Well, 10 one time is 10. And we have a lonely 0. So let's invite him to the party in the ones place. 100. So Danny solves 5 times 20 by thinking about 10 times 10. Well, was able to do that because they equal the same thing. They have the same solution. 5 times 20 is 100. 10 times 10 is 100. Now, if you need to pause the video to go ahead and write everything down, go ahead and do that now. Or if you want to rewind it a little bit so that you can watch it over again to make sure that you understand how to do this, then you can do that also. Well, looks like you finished lesson 19 homework. It is complete. Congratulations. I hope this video helped, and I will see you next time. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.